Uncle Mark. I am not a cultured man. I am not what one would call a sophisticated man.
No, you are not the yogurt of this podcast. You are
a
but
brute,
you are
really.
bland and
I'm a
white.
simpleton. Yes, I know what I like, and I like simple things.
Yes.
I like a nice Beaujolais, and
Now is that a kind of fruit?
originally,
yeah, and mayonnaise, Beaujolais and
I like
mayonnaise.
Beaujolais and mayonnaise.
Yeah, so you're Belgian.
Have you ever had Beaujolais? Because that is the good stuff right there.
Oh,
It's like the fry sauce of the Rhone region.
It's French fry sauce.
I
Yeah.
need to change my diaper. Anywho, so where do we turn? We don't turn to Uncle Doug if we want culture. Where do we go? Where do we go, Uncle Dan?
Well, to Spain, apparently.
Yes.
Yeah, because as our keen listeners may remember, last week I bragged about having recently traveled to and all around that fair country. And look, I'm doing it again. Anyway, while there, I experienced quite a lot of art, actually, from the Goyas, Rubens, and Caravaggios of the Prado to the Picassos and Dalis at the Reina Sofia to the El Grecos at the Cathedral of Toledo to the intricate geometric designs that adorn the Granada's formerly Muslim palace, the Alhambra.
Nice.
And quite a bit beyond that. One thing that becomes clear as you travel in places that are older than our own little baby Yoda of a country is that religion is one of the most prominent, obvious, and annoying themes of art.
Yes.
It is a trend that goes back well before the Renaissance of the 14 and 1500s, which is what I always picture when I think of religious art. It goes back before the Dark Ages.
Yes.
It goes back before the Byzantine, the Roman, the Hellenistic periods, before the Indian, Chinese, and Japanese Buddhist art. There are literally Stone Age cave paintings going back tens of thousands of years depicting supernatural dipshittery. Basically, religious art is as old as art and idiots exist. So, if you've ever taken an art history class, which Uncle Mark, I'm sure you've dropped out of one or two of those.
Oh, well, I got through quite a few as well.
Okay, well, that's good. You will have been taught, and likely no longer remember, that there are specific tropes in various movements of religious art. There are common symbols and iconographic messages that snooty art professors, that I'm totally just making up in my mind because I never took an art history class, will insist that you have to understand if you're to fully grasp the scope of the art that you're looking at.
They're not
Here's
wrong.
the thing. Yeah, I know. Hey, here's the thing. I know. I literally think it's very interesting to know all that stuff. To know that white often indicates purity, while black can mean death and mourning. To know that the hand positions indicate that the Buddha is in different modes, or that a lion in Christian art can mean strength, but if it's carrying a banner, then it might refer to the tribe of Judah. But if it has wings, then it's probably referencing the Apostle Mark. Incidentally, if the lion is setting down an inexpensive Pinot Grigio to get up to go for a pee for the third time in 2 hours, then it's likely referencing Uncle Mark.
Directly referencing Uncle Mark, yes, that's exactly right.
So there you go. It can be a useful shorthand to know all the little secret codes that artists have used throughout the ages in their religious art. But on this latest trip to Spain, I realized that for most of my art viewing life, I've been looking at religious art through their lens. I've been trying to see the meaning that they see in it, much like how we were trained to read the holy books by ignoring the glaring logical holes and obvious immorality contained therein. So this time, as I walked through the great galleries, I started to ask different questions. What is this art saying to me, Mr. Atheist Guy? What is being presented to me on its face without any imagined professors telling me what I should be seeing? Because here's the really interesting thing about all art. It's really not about the subject matter. Artists, from painters to writers to actors to dancers, use their subject matter to reveal something deeper about the human condition, whether whether they want to or not, artists are telling us something about the time they live in, the anxieties and concerns of that moment in history, and they're telling us about the people who commission the art and what they want to see and what they don't want to see, and they're revealing things about themselves. They're showing us something about who they are, what's important to them, and what their deepest fears and hopes might be.
And that they do not understand the anatomy of cats. That is also very important.
Oh, there is so much anatomy that they don't understand, including human anatomy. Man, there was one painting at the Prado that was a painting of Jesus. It was they don't allow you to take pictures at the Prado of of any of their art, but that was the one I had to sneak a picture of because it was a Jesus that had abs that literally went above the nipples. They went all the way up to his neck.
Wow.
Neck abs.
He was a strong carpenter.
It wasn't always well understood, even by those who were really studying. Anyway, I wanted to just show you fellas a few pieces of art that I saw on my trip and chat with you briefly about what we see in them from our perspective rather than from the Christian one. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
I shall try. I did have quite a bit of art history, and I did enjoy kind of getting the decoder ring.
Yeah,
the key means this, the winged this, I did enjoy that, but I also believe that art should be a completely subjective experience per viewer. So let's play the game, Alex.
Yeah, I think we should. Let's start with Diego Velázquez's Christ Crucified. This is from 1632.
It's wonderful. It's beautiful.
It's gorgeous, and it's considered one of the sort of landmark paintings of the time.
Yeah, I would say so.
It is Christ on the cross. Very little else. He's against a black background. Mm-hmm. He's got the 4 nails instead of 3. He went with a nail for each foot, which is that's an artistic choice. Here's what I wanted to get to.
That's a generous Roman. Who's willing to do 4 instead of 3. So
I'm going to do you a favor.
Count that as a win,
kid.
Count that as a win.
So I was looking at this painting, and here's what occurred to me. I see no pain in this painting. There's a man who should be experiencing insane amounts of pain. He's got the crown of thorns. He's got a nail in each hand, a nail in each foot. He's been stabbed in the side.
Yeah.
He's bleeding. He's got a very cute little diaper on. Mm-hmm. And I don't see even a shred of pain. Which to me is a really to me that indicates. I mean, he doesn't look like he's wincing. He doesn't look like he's contorted. He almost looks like if you take away the blood and you imagine that you're looking at him from above, he could just be relaxing on a cross.
He could also be very, very stoned.
Or just fully dead.
But
as we've examined saints and things over time, the idea there's a much beloved Christian concept that martyrs smiled through their pain or endured the pain without wincing. That's very important to the Christian. And I don't know, we're not necessarily looking at this from a Christian perspective, but that's very important to kind of the Christian mystique of martyrdom, right?
Well, and that's what I'm talking about here. Like, one of the things that's interesting to me is the mindset that says that a man could go through all of this and then just kind of be looking down like, this will be over at some point.
Well, and I also would so it's worth pointing out, if listeners haven't pulled this up to look at it, it's an extremely realistic painting.
And we'll put links to these in the show notes. It
is beautiful. The anatomy is excellent. The execution is excellent. The light, especially.
Yeah.
The sort of kind of chiaroscuro of the time is extraordinarily good. It's a masterwork.
Aside from the kind of perfectly placed linen wrapped around his genitalia and his waist, the blood dripping from his wounds, it looks incredibly real. He looks incredibly real. It's kind of this amazing way of anchoring this moment in the real world. Like the artist, it seems to me, is trying to tell you that from his perspective, this happened. Like, this is what it would have really looked like.
Yeah.
And yet, again, I can't, and I hear what you're saying, and yet he's just on a black background. There's nothing behind him. There's no world in this world. And He's just chilling.
But it's not abstract.
Yeah.
No, not at all. It's
no. There's nothing abstract about it. I just think it's a very interesting take on Jesus. And speaking of takes on Jesus, I want to move on now to...
I was going to say, it's also an incredibly restrained amount of blood for Catholic depictions of the crucifixion.
And before we move on, I want to know what diet Jesus is on. Is that keto?
Right.
Damn.
Yeah. It's the sweating blood out of every pore diet. Yeah. It works great.
I'm going to download that app.
I'm going to move on now to an El Greco. Domenicos Theotokopoulos was his real name, so that's why the Spaniards decided just to never say his name.
Call him the Greek.
Just give him the Greek. Call him the Greek. This is the Adoration of the Shepherds. And this one, the lighting is particularly astounding in this. El Greco had this very weird style towards the end of his life. This may be his last painting. And it's of the birth of Jesus, and Jesus is fucking glowing like a motherfucker, and everybody is uplit, and it's spooky and weird.
It does have kind of a horror movie. It's like looking into the briefcase in Pulp Fiction, and maybe that's what was in there. It was Jesus. But I personally, I love as a person who works in the arts and is kind of familiar with all this stuff. I love El Greco. I think that
I do too.
His depictions of the human form, etc., were so radical at the time that they, obviously he was a huge influence on Salvador Dali, who came along far, far later. Right. But, and we'll talk about another person who was kind of maybe the father of surrealism in a minute. But this is kind of surrealism, and the attenuation of the human form I think is extraordinary, and the color is also something that just is...
his colors were crazy. Like it's funny because there were some early El Grecos there as well that were very sort of dark portraits of
noblemen,
Spanish
and stuff.
Gentlemen, whatever. And then he gets into this stuff, and he's got this one guy who apparently was probably his son, was the model for it, but he looks like a Frankenstein's monster towering over the Christ child.
Right.
And Mary looks very calm, but everybody else looks pretty freaked out about this guy, including the angels floating above, some of whom seem to be like trying to block their eyes from the brightness of the Christ child.
Well, they've got very sensitive little peens, those babies. They should be careful about how radioactive, how many rads Jesus puts off in an hour.
Boy, speaking of little peens, check out the junk on Jesus. That is...
There's nothing there.
No. I can't zoom in that far.
I feel like it might be a Jesus. I'm not sure.
I can't zoom in that far, but that really is just the software that the court put on my computer. So anyway, we should probably move on before I say too much.
The point I was trying to make with each of these is that El Greco's depicting a moment that we all know. It's the birth of Christ. It's supposed to be the most important birth that has ever occurred on the face of the earth. And he chose to go real weird with it.
Yeah, it's very the elongated, the elongated limbs and fingers.
Yeah,
the tableau, the way it's laid out.
Moment, and maybe this is the way he decided to go. Yeah, the perspective. Your perspective is very low in the frame.
Yeah,
it's a very long, tall picture. I've seen this. It's huge, right? It's very strange.
It's quite enormous.
Yeah.
And like I said, that uplighting just creates this weird shadows on everybody's faces. It really does look like they're looking at an alien.
Nobody else was doing this sort of thing, as far as I know. This was a very radical kind of departure.
Right. Yeah. One more thing. There's one that I want to close out with because it's sort of the pièce de résistance of my entire trip. But I did want to talk about in the Prado, they have a room devoted to one Hieronymus Bosch.
Yes.
Apparently the Spaniards aren't able to say his name either, so they just call him El Bosco.
No, nobody's able to say his name, actually. Hieronymus.
When I was in junior high school, when we first learned about Hieronymus Bosch, I thought Hieronymus was an adjective.
Of all of the Bosches, this one was the most Hieronymus.
You know what? It should be. This is fucking Hieronymus.
I'm making it happen.
Yeah, exactly. You heard it here first, folks. Go out and use it in a sentence today. The first Bosch that I wanted to talk about is the Table of the Seven Deadly Sins. It's literally a table, and Andrea and I stared at this thing, and each of the seven deadly sins is named, which is nice on the thing, but named in a language that I don't know.
Is it gula?
So, for instance,
is that what it
gluttony is gula.
Yeah.
And so we challenged ourselves to look at each of the panels and figure out which of the deadly sins we thought was being depicted. And to be perfectly honest, when you look at it without like trying to, without his perspective, what you see is just people fucking trying to live their goddamn lives.
Yeah, I'm kind of jumping. I'm jumping ahead, looking at several of the seven deadly sins that you've posted. If you didn't tell me these, other than the one where maybe they're eating a little too much, if you didn't say that these were part of the seven deadly sins, it looks like normal scenes from life, except a guy's got a table on his head in one.
Yeah. The only one I can easily identify is gluttony.
Yeah. The rest of them, and even that one, I'm just like, I don't know. There's one that looks like a woman facing away from us with a lampshade on her head, but I think that's supposed to be just a veil. And and that one's pride. Well, why is that pride? And why is it so bad? There is a little demon.
Oh, I see the demon. He's holding the mirror. He's holding the mirror for her.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
So okay, but it's just a woman looking in a mirror, for Christ's sake. Like, these are the things that we're taught are supposed to be the worst thing.
Okay, what is with the guy with the table on his head?
Well, that's wrath. And
a fight seems to have broken out.
Yeah, it's very funny. There are three figures in the wrath panel. There's two guys who are wielding knives, one woman who seems to be dancing with one of them, and one of them has a table on his head.
I think she's trying to stop them from fighting. I think she's intervening. So too.
Yeah, she's stepping in. They're both dumpy and weird looking, and it's a very funny panel.
There's a perfectly
and I like it
good
a lot.
hat on the ground, which is crazy.
But sometimes you want a little bit more protection than a felt hat can offer, so you put a small end table.
And Nvidia, which means envy.
That's right.
It looks like just a normal street scene of neighbors having a chat.
Yeah, there's a couple dogs chilling. Yeah. There's a guy holding a bird. You don't necessarily see any, there's...
And they're kind of pastoral and it's like unmenacing.
It's like they're if you know Bruegel, like the Bruegel paintings, which were literally just scenes of rural life, right? They were just peasants dancing and carrying on, but it wasn't really an indictment of peasant life. It was
I personally have never been a fan of Bruegel. I thought he was way too Hieronymus.
He was borderline Hieronymus.
Listen, there was a Bruegel in the next room over from the Bosch room that was astounding, though. Look up, it was called something like The Triumph of Death or Death something. If you guys, I don't have this pulled up for you guys, but it's amazing. It is Game of Thrones.
Perfect.
There is an army of skeletons charging in. It's terrifying.
Oh yeah,
and
that
crazy.
was about the plague. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, anywho, what was amazing to me about the seven deadly sins table is mostly just that it's like, we're just looking at normal life, and he's trying to pathologize it into the literal worst things that humans can do.
Well, and
that's kind of the whole kit and caboodle with these people.
Here's what's funny about Hieronymus Bosch, though, is he was the father of nightmares. Like, Bosch, if he wanted to depict something fucked up, it was not a problem for him. So, just like three people standing in a little house, it does not look that nightmarish to me.
Right, exactly. And with that, we'll use that as our segue into the final piece that I wanted to talk about, Bosch's The Garden of Earthly Delights.
Yeah.
It is a triptych that folds up if you ever wanted to, which you would be put in jail if you tried to do.
It makes it easier to steal, so give it a shot.
Yeah, exactly. who knows? People
Yeah.
stole all kinds of art. This one has the 3 panels. There's the one on the left, which is the Garden of Eden. Mm-hmm. There's the middle big panel, which is the Garden of Earthly Delights. That's the now. That's I guess this phase of the world. And then there's the right panel, which is hell.
And boy, is it hell.
And all of these panels are, let me see if I can come up with the word, crazy.
Yeah.
All of these panels are insane. The one on the far left, our Garden of Eden, is meant to be a sort of beautiful utopia with critters all over the place, many of which he just invented out of his little cuckoo
Absolutely.
brain.
And let's place this in time. This is about a 500-year, little over 500 years old.
Yeah.
So this is
from early 1500s, maybe 1500, 1505, somewhere in that range. So amazing. This predates, like you were saying, this predates actual surrealism by a damn sight.
Yeah, by
and
hundreds
nobody could like how he came up with any of this stuff is astounding.
Astounding how he came up with this and was not declared a witch. To me, is really kind of crazy, right? Because he could have been gobbled up.
Because invented critters is one thing. Like a dog that only has 2 front legs and a tail is one thing. But if you move on to the next panel, which is the Earthly Delights panel. Yeah. It's bonkers.
It's bonkers. And it's very sexualized. It's it's a lot of nudity and very, very sexualized behavior.
Yeah. Is anybody wearing clothes? I don't think anybody's wearing clothes.
I see a guy in a red poncho right in the middle.
Yeah, a couple people are wearing berries.
But he's probably just like a healthcare provider.
Right.
So...
And you guys, there's a wonderful high res zoom in and check it out version of this, and you can listen to a very David Attenborough type person talking about each of the things. He doesn't ever mention things like the guy that's bent over and the other guy is using his butthole as a flower vase.
Yeah, I was just looking at that. Weird. I was drawn to that.
Weird. It's very strange.
Yeah.
But he does talk about giant birds in the picture and a bunch of men riding around in a circle on beasts, various beasts, goats, deer, whatever, with a bunch of women corralled in a hot tub in the middle.
Yeah. There are black people. It is out of control.
Right, exactly.
Completely out of control.
And this was, of course, Bosch's idea of the bad things, the sin.
That's right.
Which everybody seems to be having a great time.
It looks like if Burning Man was held someplace nice.
Right. Yeah.
Where there was water and grass, right?
Yeah. There are these really crazy floating boats that are cool. There's all sorts of stuff. There's one guy doing a handstand in the water, but his hands are holding his junk and his legs are. Everybody's literally just kind of having a great time.
Yeah.
Which leads us, of course, to hell.
Yeah.
Hell, where a pair of ears will wield a knife at you, where half of a torso, with 2 arms that turn into tree trunks, being supported by boats, is a jail cell. We
know it's hell because on top of that structure is a giant bagpipe. And,
yes, exactly.
And then one of the other largest figures in the image is a gigantic hurdy-gurdy.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Why not?
So there's music. There's music in hell.
And there's a bird that's now eating people and shitting them out through a chamber pot. And of course, the anal play is out of control. It is everywhere in hell. Hell is all about bum stuff. So, it's just, it's one of those things where Terry Gilliam would look at it and be like, dude, a little over the top.
Yeah. There's those disembodied ears with a knife sticking out from in between them, and it's a very phallic nature.
Some stabby comedy shop ears.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, I guess what occurred to me as I sort of stared in awe and wonder at this bizarre work, clearly the work of a mad genius.
Yeah.
What I realized was that the story that he has been told his whole life and that he clearly took on as real is fucked up.
Yeah.
You think?
The story itself, the one that everybody believed about the most human thing in the world, which is sex, or or just human curiosity about, what happens if I stick a flower in my bum? I don't know. Maybe I'll try it.
Well, it's also you're right, and it's the Christian terror of the natural world.
Yeah.
When to us, both the first and the middle panel look a little weird. It's kind of a party that you should be told in advance what's going on.
Right, yeah.
But even if you showed up and you weren't ready, you'd be like, okay, give me a few minutes, I can get into this.
Yeah.
It looks kind of amazing and wonderful, and it's people experiencing nature in some way via each other and via the literal natural world.
And nobody seems to be getting hurt by anybody
It's a
else.
beautiful day.
Nothing's going against anybody's own volition. So what I finally realized as I stared at this was the only people who belong in hell are the pricks that are standing in judgment over these people having a good time.
Yeah.
Like it is the onlooker who is looking at this center panel and thinking something horrible is happening.
Yeah.
That needs to really reevaluate themselves.
Yeah. Can you imagine this used to scare the
time.
shit out of people? Like when this was opened on Easter, because a lot of these things that are multi-paneled, they would close. All but for a certain time of year, the Feast of St. Stephen or something, right? Then they would be opened and the peasants could view it. And this probably ruined people's sleep for the rest of their lives.
Probably.
Truly.
Literally, like you see some of these images and you're just like, oh my God. I'm not sure what kind of brain came up with this, but I'm pretty sure that now that it exists, we're all doomed.
Yeah, but just from an art perspective, he is probably the father of surrealism. So swing and a miss there, Hieronymus, but good job.
It's definitely worth looking at. We'll put links to everything in the show notes and definitely check it all out. But
yep.
I just think I think what we can do is look at these and take their perspective as our jumping off point and then ask the real questions, which are like, what's actually going on here?
Yeah, and remember that art is a reflection of those who pay for it. So the money in this period of time, the only money there was outside of a few just rich individuals was in the church. So that's what the art was about, right? Yep. So there you go.
So when you go forth, ladies and gentlemen, friends, nieces and nephews, out into the world and regard the art, don't take their word for it. Enjoy it on your terms and let it teach you your lessons.
And if you steal this, we'll give you a P.O. box number and no questions asked.
Exactly.
All right.
Let's move on.